Hey, welcome in. I'm Rita, and this is the story I'm telling myself. If you've ever felt like you're standing in your own way, you are not alone. Let's get into it. Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of the Story I'm Telling Myself podcast. I'm so happy that you are back with us again today and here to meet our guest, Sabrina Parsons. We are going to talk about the lessons that are available to us in the moments when we might feel our deepest failure. And this is something I think that we all need to hear and understand. And I'm so excited to have Sabrina come and share her story with us. But if you are with us for the live today, thank you. We do this live for you because we enjoy engaging and interacting with you. So if you are with us live, please hop in the comments, introduce yourselves, and welcome Sabrina to the show. Sabrina, while they're getting started in the comments, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody who you are?
Great. Thanks, Rita. I'm really happy to be here with you today. I am Sabrina Parsons. I'm the CEO of Palo Alto Software. We produce a product called Live Plan, which is a tool for entrepreneurs so that they can plan their business no matter what stage they're at. So whether they're starting or they're trying to grow their business, we help them put together strategic plans and financial forecasts. And really, we have our main mission of just helping people succeed in business. So the cool thing is I get to live in this entrepreneurial startup world every day, even though Palo Alto Software has been around for over 30 years.
That's very cool. Liveplan.com. That is the best place for you to connect with Sabrina, and you're going to want to do that. Whether you're an entrepreneur needing this product or not, I think that you're going to want to get her socials, follow her, stay connected with Sabrina and the amazing things that she's doing. But we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, and I cannot believe that we are already over halfway through season 2, and we are getting to our very first conversation about culture. Organizational culture and the stories that we tell ourselves. It was a strong theme in season 1, and I don't know what's happened. It's not been on the focus of the guests that we have. So Sabrina, I'm so excited to get back to this topic with you today because we do have this strange relationship with failure. As human beings, we love to be right. We have a really, really, really hard time with being wrong. And we have different responses when we feel like we are wrong. Some of us, when we feel like we are wrong, we look outside of ourselves and we look to blame circumstances and other people around us. Others of us have that devil that just goes on the personal attack and lays it right at our feet and holds us to the fire. And that's sort of the devil that you were dancing with. Why don't you start us at the beginning, talk to our listeners a little bit at the start of the story about where you were in your company with your hiring process.
Yeah. So, gosh, it's been about 10 years since this happened, maybe even, 15. I feel like COVID has made the middle part of that sort of blend. And, it's like 2 years that were 10 years. But it was about 10 years ago, maybe 15. But we were doing a lot of hiring and the company was growing. And I started to notice a little bit of a pattern. We would put a job out there. We would get a lot of applicants. We felt like we were being very purposeful with how we interviewed and brought people in. And we various times hired people with just perfect resumes, just that resume that just looks like, wow, I can't believe it. This is exactly, if I were to design a resume for this job, this is what it would be. Person would come in. They would be with us for 3 or 4 months and it wasn't working for them and it wasn't working for us. And so it just felt like and it happened various times as we were hiring, and we'd get somebody who'd come in and they'd do beautifully. And, we have people that have been with our company for 20 years. So we do retain people, but there was just this pattern as we were ramping up hiring. And it just felt like, what am I doing wrong? What are we doing wrong? How can people have these perfect resumes and then they come in and it's just a disaster? It doesn't work. They're not happy. They're not getting things done. The team is unhappy. None of it is working. And it gets to a point where it becomes very clear, like, this person is not a good fit and we need to move on. And
so, but I'm going to pause you just for a second to welcome a couple of people. So Gary, great to have you with us. Gary joins us from England. He has been a guest on the show for both seasons. And William, you're back. I'm so happy you came back this week. Thanks for joining us. And he concurs with you that we are in this weird time warp. But part of what was happening for you as the CEO is that you were a smart CEO, Sabrina. You were doing exit interviews.
Oh, yeah.
You were reading or receiving feedback in the exit interviews. Talk a little bit about that and how that informed the internal narrative that you had around this crisis of hiring.
Yeah. So as people leave, whether they're leaving because they've been with us for 5-6 years and, they're going to go do a PhD, or sometimes people leave and it's a very positive thing and you're glad that you've helped them get to this next phase of their lives and they're moving to a different country or something's happened, and they're not leaving because they're unhappy or we're unhappy. It's just a different phase in their life. And sometimes they're leaving because things didn't work out. So we always want to understand and do an exit interview for both of those situations. And when people were leaving and they were unsuccessful, there started to be some trends that we saw. So I would read and I would hear people saying, well, there's not enough strategy and there's not enough direction, and there's just not enough, you're keeping it all to yourselves and I don't know what I need to do. But there's not enough strategy was this line that kept coming up again and again with these hires that appeared to have a perfect resume and yet were not successful in the role. It just was this.
It's going to be a bit of a stab to the heart when you're the CEO and somebody says, you don't have a strategy.
It is, but what was hard about it was wait, but let's go back, let's look at it. And why are there these other people who are thriving and who are absolutely just killing it, and they're not saying that? So, it was this juxtaposition of some people come in and they're wildly successful and they're actually excited about the opportunities that we have here. And that's what they look at them for. And some people are telling us, you don't have enough strategy. I can't do my job. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And those are two wildly different opinions. And it became clear
and wildly different experiences. And I will say, as somebody who spent time in human resources, in terms of hiring strategy, most companies for certain positions, they want to go out to the top tier colleges and universities, and they want to get the top performing students out of those graduating classes. And I've worked inside of Fortune 200 organizations that have wrapped themselves around the axle, trying to create an onboarding process and trying to warp the organization to create something that will make those students want to stay.
Yeah.
But that was not the approach that you took. Tell our listeners what you guys did with the feedback that you got.
Yeah, and I do also want to address, because William, you have some great comments, but I will say that new people coming in who were wildly successful obviously weren't legacy, and so we had we had all this data of people who'd come in, they were very successful, people who would come in and they weren't as successful. And what we started to understand, and it was actually looking back at me and at the executive team, and okay, who are we, and what are the common threads about us and how we manage the business? Because some people are seeing our management and they're taking off and they're doing awesome things. And some people are saying, I don't know what to do in your company. And so really looking and examining the kind of company we were and realizing like, oh, there's a very distinct culture here and we're not articulating it. We are not articulating it when we hire, and that's where we're going wrong. These people who were coming in with these perfect resumes, they were used to working in a different culture and in a different kind of company. We, as a management group, were a group of people who are terrible micromanagers. We do not micromanage people well. It is something that is not in my wheelhouse. I don't want to get down to those nitty-gritty details. I am a mom of 3. I have 3 boys. I do way too much micromanaging at home. I do not want to micromanage at the office. And I want to work with people who aren't afraid to really come in and own their job and own the responsibility and want more responsibility and want authority with responsibility. The people that were not doing well in our business went off and they had successful careers in much larger organizations with a lot of structure and a lot of middle managers and a lot of project management. And that's fine. Everybody has to find where they are going to be most successful, but that was what we started to realize. The common denominator of the people who succeeded were people who didn't want to be told what to do and who thrived in finding opportunities. And in doing this work and in examining and in exit interviews and in really understanding, why are they saying there's no strategy? We have a strategy. We talk about it. We use this whole process of OKRs and everybody knows what our OKRs are. Why do they still say there's no strategy? And it came down to sort of the way certain people want to work versus the way our company worked.
Right. And they're just naming what they can put their finger on a name because it's, again, the story they start telling themselves. And, we are not always as self-aware as we need to be about who we are and what we want and what we need. And so I just want to say, hey, Leslie, who puts together the wonderful list of LinkedIn shows, including this one for you guys to take in. You should follow Leslie and get her drop every week. And Gail is with us. Gail, you got to come back to the show next season. We got to talk some more. And Ashif, welcome to the show. Haven't seen you here before, but I'm happy to have you with us. So Sabrina, you have this realization that this gets to not technical credentials, but another layer of insight about people in terms of your ability to successfully hire people that can thrive. And I can say that when I worked in California for Gap Incorporated, I worked with several peers that I held in huge esteem. And I mean, they were so smart. They were so capable. Some of the best people that I worked with in my career was during that time in my career. And there were those of us that thrived in the Gap environment. And there were people that would hit the door, so smart, so capable, and would walk away. Like you said, they would walk away usually within 18 months. And we would be doing their going away thing. And they would be like, I don't know how you stay. I don't know how but I was thriving. And I think you were naming a lot of it. It was like there was so much freedom to see and chase opportunity without asking permission. It was definitely a do not ask permission culture. It was an ask for forgiveness culture. And I had spent so much time working in Midwestern Fortune 200 firms where you were so over micromanaged. It was the hardest thing for me when I came back, when I left California and came back to the Midwest, and I was trying to find a place to work. And I was just like, I just can't fit into that company. I can't fit into this company. So I really understand what you're saying, but talk a little bit about what you guys had to do as a leadership team. So you had this story that you were telling yourselves about hiring to a resume, that, finding the right technical expertise. This is a very big mental shift for people to get through. How did you guys navigate that?
So as we found these common themes of like the everyone who doesn't seem to succeed says this thing that we don't have enough strategy. So let's dig into it. What is it about our company? How do we run our company? So we started to break it down into what are the pieces that we think make our culture. So one of the things that all of us that run the business and the people who are successful are very comfortable with and really love and thrive on is data. In the world of technology, you can have a lot of data and you can manage by gut feel, you can manage by opinion. We like to look at data and use data to give people a lot of freedoms. Here's our KPIs. Here are what we're trying to do. Get there any way you want. Here's all the reports you have access to. Here's the resources that can help you pull more data. Let's dig into it. Let's understand it. And when we can use data to make decisions, let's do that so that you don't have to sweat it. So you don't have to worry and wonder, you can't always use data to make decisions. So we had to be clear about you can't have analysis paralysis, but if there is information, we want to see it. We want to look at it and we want to be able to measure success anytime we can, because that makes it easier to put those goalposts together and to know what you're working for. So that was, the first tenet of the culture that we knew was important to us. We rely on data. But then we also are very passionate about our customers, and we want to have a customer be better off after they've bought our product than they were before. And if they're not, we want to give them their money back. We really have this mission of, being passionate about helping people succeed in business, and we want to solve for the customer. So that was, our number 2 tenet of our culture. If you don't have a passion and a mission for the customer, then you're probably not going to thrive, because the mission and the passion helps you be excited and find the opportunities and not be worried about what's the right thing. Do I have the permission? And again, some people thrive in that sort of organizational structure, and there's nothing wrong with that. It was just recognizing that that's not who we were. So we rely on data, we solve for the customer. The other thing about us is that we are very transparent. We share all our revenue numbers, our expense numbers. We share all of our financials with our employees because we want them to have the information to help us get to where we're trying to go. We want them to understand things where you see in a lot of companies, we want them to understand profit margin. We want them to work towards profit sharing in a way that makes sense to them. We also wanted our employees to have more of that ownership mindset where, you can give a budget to a marketing department, and in a lot of companies that head of marketing is going to spend every dollar because they're afraid the next year, if they don't spend every dollar, they won't get that budget. Versus understanding that every dollar you spend, right, there's margins involved. You're probably only making 20 cents on that dollar. But if you don't spend the dollar, it goes straight to the bottom line. And so being much more transparent with our employees allowed them to play a different kind of role in the financial health of the company and in their own financial health, because we do profit sharing. So that was
I love that. I mean, I've got to pause us right there because I have worked in those large companies where there is the rush to spend. I mean, exactly what you're saying. And it is not an ownership mindset. So I love that you guys dialed into this. And in this the story arc really starts to make sense for me, Sabrina, about what you guys discovered about the people who were thriving, because it was the people who wanted to have that level of stakeholder engagement in the business.
Exactly.
They weren't just there to do a job.
Exactly. And also giving them the tools and helping them trust us, right? Saying, we want to share all the financials with you. We want you to understand where we're at. And we really wanted to drive home this point about, if you don't spend the dollar, it goes straight to the bottom line. Now, if you spend the dollar and it helps us improve, great, let's spend the dollar, but let's make, the right decisions. And that actually brought us to the next tenet of the culture, which was that we wanted to give, we call it, we give you the autonomy to be awesome. This is the piece where you ask for forgiveness and not permission. We want you to have agency, to have autonomy, because you know what our KPIs are. You know what our metrics are. We're being transparent. So just go out there and find opportunities. Bring in the right people, bring in the right resources, ask for what you need, but have agency in your job and your responsibilities, because sometimes that's where you find the biggest opportunities, rather than trying to kind of pull everybody in and guide them to just your vision. Allow people to have more vision, that autonomy to be awesome. And that also means you have to hire really smart, awesome people. And so that really fit into what we wanted to do. That's the next tenet of the 6 tenets that we have, is we're picky about our peers. So hire people that are smarter than you. Really hire interesting, smart people above perfect resumes. And that was one that, we really learned the hard way, because we were so focused on these perfect resumes. And then the last tenet of our culture is we value community. And that doesn't mean just in our company, in our office, and our employees, but being part of the community that we live in. So we give back to our community. We volunteer as a company to a few nonprofits that we've picked. And we also have a grant program through a community foundation in Oregon. The Oregon Community Foundation runs our grant program, and we have a committee of employees who evaluate grants once or twice a year, depending on what's going on. And they get to choose where we give grants based on some, a mission that fits our, we want people to be successful in business, but also we're a technology company. So we do a lot of granting for STEM and education and, giving back to our community in those ways. But it was really looking at our failures that had us understand that we had a specific culture. We had to articulate that culture. And then 10, 15 years later, we have to work hard to make sure that we are really living up to the culture. And we've made some changes, and we've evolved, and we are at kind of the mercy of our own employees to keep us honest about the culture that we articulate, so that it's not just, a culture deck that you see out there that it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just out there to look good.
Yeah, and there are a lot of those. Well, I have several follow-ups. I want to say hey to Lisa. Great to have you with us again today. So let's talk a bit about this autonomy to be awesome, which is the language that you guys have chosen, and it speaks to my soul. I love that. Where is a moment when somebody chased after something, used their autonomy, and they had to ask for forgiveness? It did not work the way that they wanted, because this becomes the true test of the leadership of a company and their ability to live the values they're espousing in their culture. Can you share an example of that with us?
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm happy to say we have lots of examples, and I think that's an important one, where you really have to walk the walk so that people believe you. So, if you say ask for forgiveness and not permission, then you have to forgive, right? And you have to be able to show people that you really, what is important is the actions, why you did them, and what you learned from it. And you're not going to, you're not going to you're not going to put the ball in the net every single time. Like, that's impossible. But many times you're going to learn a whole lot more from the failures than the successes, because you're going to examine them. So I would have to say that we have a lot of examples. We're very big on a test culture, and what we call the MVP. People have heard this, minimum viable product. So you have an idea, you want to put something out there. We encourage our employees to think about, okay, what's the minimum viable product to put this out there and test it, so that we can make mistakes and learn from them before we invest all of the resources to build this perfectly. And so we've had a lot of examples. I can remember one in particular because it was very it was very counterintuitive, and we were all shocked, and it did not succeed, but we learned so much from it. There was probably, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, somebody on our marketing team really felt strongly about the steps in our shopping cart and how people were adding things in the funnel once they actually got into adding something to their cart. And they felt strongly that the current funnel we had was outdated and the design was old, and this was bringing down our conversion rate. And they spent a lot of time researching a lot of competitors, different websites that had beautiful shopping carts, just doing a lot of work. Went in, changed the shopping cart, changed the funnel. It looked beautiful, it made sense, and it failed miserably. The conversion rate went down by like 70%, which is a big deal and means real money is getting lost. But it was one of those moments that really, to be able to look at it and say, yeah, this failed, this didn't work. But instead of saying, well, why did you do this? And this wasn't done right, or you're in trouble because we're losing 70% of our revenue every day, to be able to say, wait, let's step back. What happened? What did we do wrong? Let's really learn some lessons. And they're lessons then that you can apply going forward. So the number one lesson was, when you're making a change, especially where it, gets to your bottom line, right? Where the people are putting their credit cards into the shopping cart, let's probably not change 8 variables at the same time. Because when you change 8 variables at the same time, even though it looks beautiful and you think you've really gone through this list of all these things that weren't working, when the test fails, we don't really have clarity as to what of those 8 things we changed is wrong, or which 2 or which 3, or so it really helped us understand. And this person actually helped us see, like, wait, we need to be a lot more patient with our testing. And we also have to really put in a few more protocols where we're going to test important things so that we know why something failed. So the lesson there wasn't that it failed. The lesson was, we don't even know why it failed. So we got to get better at this.
I love that, because that is the theme, right? That is the question that we're asking this week is, are you learning from those fail moments? And I think it's a beautiful story that I wish we would see more companies adopt, this idea of embracing, going after this strategy of going after more no's, more opportunities, and seeing those as the learning. Oh, that was a no. Why is that a no? What are we learning from that? Let's incorporate that learning and the evolution, the design thinking that goes behind that. It's such a powerful model. We know that it works, and yet there's so few CEOs like you, Sabrina, who have really shown the fortitude and tenacity to integrate that fully into their operation. So congratulations to you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's been a long and winding process. And I would say that when I talk to people now, I took over as CEO in 2007. But I've been at Palo Alto Software since, 2001. So it's been many, many years, decades even. And I would say when people ask me what's the hardest thing about being CEO, hands down, the hardest thing, but also the most rewarding, is the people management side of it. And it's hard because people are all different, and it doesn't matter, what you say or what formula you have or how you want to do something or manage something. Every person is different. And that is one of the biggest things that I've learned, that trying to force things or trying to force someone to be managed in a certain way, that the way to be successful as a manager is to really meet the person where they are. And to also be clear with yourself, can you, right? That's part of our culture. Can we meet you where you are? That's the number one. Can we even do that? And if we can't, then you probably shouldn't be hired. And it's not just that we're not going to be happy. The people that weren't successful, they weren't happy either. It wasn't any fun for them. So really understanding that. But I think that's the biggest lesson I always try to tell people, is that you keep learning, but you never know it all when you manage people, because people are different and independent thinkers, and you have to constantly listen and adjust.
So all of us live with our own internal critic inside of our head, who's constantly at war with us in terms of our ability to feel confident about decisions that we're making, about the pathway that we are on. When you're in moments as the CEO, where you're trying to live those tenets, those values of your culture that you have stated, and it is a fail moment where there are lessons to be learned, but and look, failures are not free. There are costs, and so the reason you want to learn from them is you want the cost of that to be worth. If you take something away from it, then your return on that, right? The margin on that is a little bit better. So, but what are some of the things that come up for you that are those internal narratives that you have to step away from, that maybe want to misdirect your energy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the ones that, and it actually resulted in a change in our culture, and so, our culture deck that we actually do write down and track because we want to walk the walk, is when you have the autonomy. Awesome. You let people make a lot of decisions. You give a lot of freedom. That works most of the time, right? But it's kind of like all of the rules in our society that keep the honest people honest, right? It's not going to work for everybody. And one of those kind of internal, like, what do we do about it? Why does it bother me so much? Do we have to articulate it? Like, this is not in keeping with our culture, but we finally decided we had to articulate it, is don't ruin it for the rest of us. We want to have a culture where we don't have to write down everything, and every policy, everything isn't a policy, and there's not a million rules, right? You have the autonomy to be awesome. If you are going to be more productive at home, work at home. If you want to be in the office, be in the office. Like, we're not going to manage you. We want results. and we want the results to help us be successful. But we did have to say, don't ruin it for the rest of us. So if you're booking a plane ticket, I don't want to force anyone to do something I wouldn't do. I hate red eyes. I'm not going to put a person on a red eye because it's cheaper. But if you're picking the airline and it's, $800 round trip pretty much across the board, but it's $3,000, but it's your airline that you have more miles on and status on, you wouldn't do it if it was your money. But if it's company money, then, we had somebody do that. Or we used to have every Tuesday, there's food trucks right outside the office because we're in downtown Eugene, Oregon. And we would have a deal with the food trucks. We would tell them our employees are going to come on Tuesdays, lunch is on us, just tally it all up, and then we'll pay the bill. Until we realized a few employees were telling all their friends who don't work for our company, and they were coming down to the food carts and they were eating on our dime. So those events, which really bothered me, and it bothered me to say, does this person not belong in our business? What do we do about it? And really coming to that realization of we just have to articulate it. We just have to say, don't ruin it for the rest of us.
I love that your response is to address it and address it where it needs to be addressed versus manage it. Because the managing it is where we get into policy writing and we get all, and it's a trap. Boy, is it a trap. When you could just do exactly what you're doing, which is go address it very directly, timely, specifically. Yeah. And say, oh, we just found a boundary. We just found a boundary, so let's name it and then let's move on.
Yeah. And in the case of the food trucks, we just didn't do it for a while because we could have given out tickets. We could have tracked in a different way. And we just was that's not who we are. So someone ruined it for a while. We're just not going to do it. And then, we'll figure out what we do next, but we're not going to get into this managing it, like you say. And now there's the process and this is how we're going to do it. We just articulated.
Gosh, how much energy gets wasted in that, and that is the kind of stuff that really does start to ruin a culture.
Exactly.
Right. It really does get to that place. Well, you're feeding Gary's soul today. Gary runs. Well, he's emeritus now. His sons are running a construction company that he founded, and all of the values that you're talking about, Sabrina, are the values that they live, about really being invested in the communities where they are operating. He says, we love feeding our people. They not only feed the people that work for them, they feed the community around them and the vendors that work side by side with them and stuff. That is how deeply he believes in the same values that you are talking about. So we've only got a few minutes remaining. For the people who are listening to this, and maybe some of them are entrepreneurs starting a company that may grow someday to be like yours. Some may just be on their trajectory to someday being in a seat like you are. What advice, what guidance would you want to share about challenging your internal narrative, the story you tell yourself as a leader, so that you can really create this collaborative, jointly owned type of environment and culture that you have created in your organization?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I've thought about it a little bit because two of my sons now are kind of getting out into the world. One just graduated from college. One's going to be a junior in college. They both rowed in college because one has graduated and one still rows in college. But the one who graduated was captain for 2 years. The one who's a junior is captain now. So they have leadership positions on their teams. And we've talked a lot about this. And I think one of the things that, especially when I talk to young people, I want them to really hear is that the fit in an organization goes both ways. It isn't just about what I say in our company and what our culture is, and sort of I decree something, it's the other side too. It's when you're looking at an opportunity and you're not leadership yet, to really give yourself the permission to ask the question, is this going to be a good place for me? Not just, is this a good job? Is this a good salary? Is this the good step on the career ladder? Is this going to be a good place for me? Do I like what they're doing? Do I resonate with the message here? Because at the end of the day, I truly, truly believe that it goes both ways. I think the same way when we negotiate contracts. I always want a 30-day out on both sides for both parties. Because in my opinion, if it's not working for the other party and it's working great for us, and I'm just holding them hostage because of a contract, ultimately it's not going to work out. They're not going to be happy. They're going to drag their feet. Things aren't going to work. It's the same thing when someone's thinking about getting a job. It's got to work both ways. So don't be afraid to ask questions about culture. Understand what the work environment is, not just what the job is. And I think that then leads to being a better leader when you're in that position of understanding that it's a two-way street.
What do you think is the most pivotal question you and your leaders asked at this time when you're out there, you're recruiting some of the best talent that you can find that match that, like you said, it was like, if I could have written the resume I wanted for this job, this would have been the resume. And then you're watching those people walk out the door. What is the most pivotal question that you asked that you guys had to challenge from your internal beliefs?
So I don't know if there's one most pivotal question. There's one thing that we do, and it's really hard for people, that it's really hard for people who are hiring managers, especially if this is the first time they've been a hiring manager, is it's not necessarily a question, but it's a permission to end an interview immediately, because it feels very awkward. So if you come into an interview, we always want to ask you, like, what do you know about us? What do you know about the product? Give us some thoughts and opinions. We want to hear what people think. If the person says, oh, I'm not sure, I didn't go to the website, I haven't had time, if they haven't done their homework, we end the interview immediately, and that is not a good fit for us. If they didn't want to put in any time and effort because we didn't tell them to, or, this goes back to that micromanaging.
Yes.
If they're not there prepared and having done their homework, we've done our homework, we've Googled the people, we've gone beyond their resume, we've seen their online footprint just to get a better sense of them. If they haven't done that with our company, then they're not the right fit. And we end the interview immediately, and we thank them, and we say, we don't want to waste your time. This isn't the right fit. And it's really hard for the hiring manager. It feels very abrupt and mean, but it is also a sort of non-negotiable for us. If you come in and you haven't done the homework, then you're not going to be a good fit.
Well, what I love about that, I think about the words of Brene Brown, that one of my clients, they live by this, and that is clear as kind. And in that moment, you are being very clear, and it is kind. It is kind on multiple fronts. One is that if you allow the person to go through the full day of interviews, what you're kind of leading them on.
Yeah.
Thinking there's a possibility. When you cut it off, you're making that very clear. But the other thing is you are leaving no room for you to renegotiate your standard for any reason.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you allow it to go on, you're giving yourself space to talk yourself into closing the deal with this hire, because you need somebody right away, because.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And, it is that, what are your non-negotiables? And again, it goes both ways. I talked to both my sons about it. What are the things that are non-negotiable for you? And that's okay. You can have those. Now, you have to be cognizant. And if you're entry level, you have to understand, how to position that, but you should be able to say, this is what I want out of a job, in the same way of the job saying, this is what we want out of an employee.
I love it. Well, I don't know about you, friends. When I met Sabrina, I was like, I would love to work for her and her company. They are speaking to my soul for sure. Liveplan.com is where you can connect with her. We will have that in the show notes as well. Sabrina, thank you for coming and having such a powerful conversation about what is possible in organization cultures when we challenge the story of who's in control and we choose collaboration and commitment to our shared purpose over that human need to control. It's amazing to meet a CEO who's leading an organization that is thriving, that and to have a female leader who is doing that is just all the better for it. And it gives me hope for the future of business, because right now it's a little hard to have some hope about this with the kind of retrenchment narratives that we are hearing around organizations. So friends, listeners of the show, we all have the chance to be Sabrina in some way in our organizations, in our little part of the world. I have seen this. I talk about microculture all the time. Sometimes it doesn't matter what the yahoos at the top of the organization are doing. They let them do their good old boy BS all day long. You've got your own little team around you. You can create your own little microculture that allows you to have that pocket of sunshine that you need to make to make it possible for you to not just do the job but thrive in the team that you're in. Sabrina, thank you so much for joining us. Come back again next week, friends. We'll have another awesome conversation teed up and ready for you. Until then, have a great week. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Rita. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. If you love this episode, leave us those 5 stars and be sure to share this with a friend. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. See you back here next week.